Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So now I've just viewed the film, the 1958 film called A Night to Remember. Now, this was sort of like an old school black and white version of Titanic. There's a lot of similarities to Titanic. This is sort of like, I wouldn't call this an original to Titanic or a Titanic remake of that, because there's a lot of things different and a lot of different choices between the two, big time. But you can tell that definitely Titanic, the 1997 movie, sort of used this film as an idea for how to go about, creating a film and a story about this event. And I will say I really like this movie. It's not anything nearly as good as the '97 Titanic, but it's a good movie. It's actually really it looks very nice for the time. Like I don't know what they did, if they had like an actual prop Titanic ship, or exactly how they conducted the scenes, but they did have quite a bit of distance, far away shots of the Titanic in the water, which looked like there was a pretty damn big ship out there. So on these wide angle shots they had, so it I don't know. There was definitely a lot of work put into it. And again, the sinking was very well done. Like I said, like everything, there was like not a lot of special effects. Like, there was special effects, but there was not, like, this was before CGI, so it was all like camera trickery and props and real special effects to create everything. So they did a really good job. Like there's not those old movie antics, as you might say. In this movie, not as much anyway. It's one of those ones that was sort of, you could almost say it was a little bit beyond its time in itself. Actually, they did a really good job of conducting this film for its time. The acting was quite very well all the way around. There was a few moments of bad acting that just kind of popped out at you, like usually just like from these random characters, but it usually just kind of popped out at you a little bit here and there. But for the most part, it was fairly well done acting. Yeah, it was a good movie. What I like, another thing I like, is it incorporated the true story. If you know anything of the history of the Titanic. There was actually a ship not that far off called the California, and it depicts that actually seen the Titanic's flares, and it depicts that quite well. And I liked how they incorporated that into there, and technically they depicted it quite well. Like they showed how the California stopped before the icebergs, when they seen the icebergs in the horizon, whereas the Titanic thought it wasn't as big of a deal, so they pushed on through. So technically, and it got the distances right, and the communications right, and how the radio communications, whatever you call those people on the California ship, was asleep at the time and did not receive the signal. And also, like, everybody was asleep aside the crew that were out on deck that were doing night shift duty. And all the captain and everything was all asleep at this time. I heard that there was an issue by the captain of the California about how he was depicted in this film, which is totally understandable. But at the same time, it's also understandable that that he kind of got looked at the way he did in this overall story, because I mean, the Titanic went down and they could have been there a lot sooner than the Carpathia, and they chose to ignore the flares because apparently they thought it was some sort of fireworks celebration or company flares or something like that. But I like how they included that, and so technically they depicted it very well. I will say though is that they did kind of blatantly almost villainize the people on the California. Like I really don't think that the people acted that dumb. Like the first guy, one of the guys that worked on the ship that was up, doing watch at night with his partner there. When they're calling down to the captain doesn't really seem to care. He just kind of brushes everything off and just kind of goes back to sleep. And is just completely distant from everything. That doesn't even care to go have a look for himself or get somebody else to or anything, right? And I don't know, it's like they really portrayed the people on the California to be incredibly dumb. I mean, maybe that's how it actually happened. I mean, I know I've researched quite a bit about this. I've always had a deep interest in it, but I highly doubt the people were quite this distant from the situation, regardless of whether it's reasonable for them to sort of be placed in somewhat of a villainary standpoint in the overall story due to how all those people died, all those innocent people died, and they could have been there a lot sooner than the Carpathia, but still, whether they chose to ignore it or not, whether that's a very stupid decision or not, I don't think that they were as distant from the situation as portrayed in this film. I will say another complaint I have about the movie is that, the 97 Titanic, James Cameron's Titanic, did a great job at making that water seem as terrifying as it was. Like the water in that movie is horrifying, and the freezing temperature of it is really well brought into the situation in Titanic 1997. But the cold water is not so much. Like when people are in the water, whenever anybody's in the water, whether it's just up to their knees, or their full body in the water, hopping, jumping off ship, abandoning ship, they almost don't react to the water at all as if it's cold. Like, aside knowing that it's a Titanic movie, if you were to turn it on just when it shows, everybody, struggling in the water, the way, as much as you would know there's some sort of peril going on, you would not quite know that they're in a cold temperature place. Like, you might think they were in the tropics somewhere. Like, they are not reacting to the cold at all. I think there's one moment in the whole movie where somebody complains about how freezing cold it is, and it took so long too, and after seeing that I was like, oh wow, finally somebody is bringing up the cold. But yeah, there's almost no mention of this being a cold environment that this is going on in at all, which I know it's an older movie, but of course there's the icebergs and all of that, but other than the iceberg itself, there's nothing that signifies like this water is freezing. Like, you don't want to be in that water. Like I said, if you turned on the movie without having seen it prior or knowing it's about the Titanic, you could very easily perceive it as being in a lot warmer climate. So yeah, and like I said, I know it's an older movie. I do know that there's some limitations there with that, but even just, have the actors, the characters, talk about how freezing it is and how cold it is, and have frozen breath coming out of people's mouths when they're talking, especially when they're floating in the water, or in a lifeboat or anything like that. Like, we just seen icebergs, like a whole field of icebergs in the movie. Like, there should be more brought up about how cold the environment is. But nonetheless, I will say I was highly impressed technically for its time. I was highly impressed with this movie, and I love anything. I love delving into anything to do with the history of the Titanic. I find it very fascinating. So with that said, I did enjoy watching this film. And it's a hard one to grade. I don't know exactly what to give it, but I think B- would work, because it's got the limitations of the time it was made. It definitely has its shortcomings, but it's a damn good, rock solid movie for its time. And I will say it's something that you can kind of, if you're into it, you can kind of always have a good time watching it. I mean, it's hard to say have a good time watching it when you're dealing with, a tragic event film like this. But what I mean is, if you're interested in the subject matter, it's something that you can kind of always have on. Like, you don't want to look too in depth into something you don't know about. You want to stick in the comfort zone. You can put on that movie and you're going to enjoy it. You've never seen it before. I guarantee you that you'll at least enjoy it to a certain degree anyway, unless you're completely separate from that kind of thing. You put it on when you're sleeping, or have it on the TV when you're just doing whatever around the house. It's gonna be something that is it's a good background noise, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think a B- is a perfect grading for A Night to Remember, and I hope you enjoyed my review, and thank you very much for watching.